Welcome to another in our leadership series. I'm Alan Olson, Managing Partner of Greenstein Rogoff Olson and Company. My guest today is Wally Hawley. Wally Hawley is co-founder of InterWest Partners, one of the largest venture capital partnerships in the United States. Mr. Hawley's prior experience includes 7 years as president of SHV North America Holdings and several years as a consultant with McKinsey & Company in their San Francisco and Amsterdam offices. Wally recently finished his term as chairman of the board of trustees for Young Life. Wally is currently devoting the majority of his time to nonprofit endeavors. Wally, it's good to be with you here
Nice
today.
to be here, Alan.
Okay. What do you consider your greatest accomplishment in life?
Well, I wouldn't make it singular. I think there's probably three that I would think about. The first is family. It's the legacy you create. And I think in my family, my children are growing up to do things that are significant, important, and I think that's something I leave behind me and is an important thing in my life. The second, obviously, is InterWest in the secular world, where we built this firm from a very small base in 1979. It'll be 30 years today. It's large, very successful, and we have built a lot of companies and created a lot of jobs. Perhaps the most important, though, is the ones that I'm working on now, which really involves my faith. I'm involved in a number of educational and Christian organizations, and really I would say that my specialty, if there is one, is taking small ideas and organizations and building them to scale. And when I think of the number of people that have been impacted because of the scale that we've created, I would say that's one of my accomplishments.
Okay. Wally, you met a lot of people over the years through your career and also your service in the faith-based organizations. What do you look for in a leader?
First and foremost, integrity. If you don't have that, we just don't go on to anything beyond that. So I'm very much focused on that. Secondly, I want to see a leader who is passionate about what they're doing and totally committed. This is not something you can do part-time or one-handed. And so I want to see that they are very much involved in what they're doing. I also pay a lot of attention to how they treat other people. It's important that the leader gives value and builds off other people and not himself. And I think that you can see that many times when you walk through an organization. You'll watch how the people react to the leader and whether they relate to him and whether he relates to them. And I love a saying that somebody put on their desk that there's nothing you can't do if you're willing to give other people the credit. So I certainly look for that in a leader as well.
That's great, great. You know, given your stage in life and you've gone through all these years of experience, if you were talking to the youth today, what advice would you have for them in preparing for their future and filling a leadership role?
Well, I have some thoughts on that, and I must confess, first of all, that a lot of what I'm going to recommend I necessarily didn't do so well myself early on, so maybe we can learn from that. I think it's very important to be very intentional and explicit about your values, Alan, to know what you do value, and by that I don't mean what you say. It's how you spend your time and what you do, because you reflect your values based on what you're doing. And I'm reminded of a situation where I was talking with one leader, and he talked to me about his values, and then I asked him how he spent his time and what he did. And we matched him up. It was very clear that how he was spending his time didn't match his values. He either had different values or he needed to go back and reallocate his time. And he changed his time to match his values. So that's one thing I would do. It's what I would call a scorecard. A friend of mine, Reggie McNeil, wrote a book where he talked about scorecards. And what you're really doing is putting down where you're trying to go in life and what's important to you. It's amazing to me how many times people will say, well, I have a certain value. It might be balance in the family. And then you look at them and you find out that they spend practically no time in their family. So I encourage people to put down your own scorecard. Think about what it is that matters to you and what you're trying to do, even now, not just in the future. And then continually monitor, am I committing myself and my time to match up with those values? The next thing I would recommend is the fact that they should get involved with covenant groups. where you can be held accountable for what you're trying to do. This is something I wish I'd done. I do now in a covenant group, but I didn't back then. And that really relates to something larger. Who are you hanging out with? The people you're hanging out with are going to be reflective of the values that you have as well. So look at their values and decide whether that's what you want to do in terms of following and hanging out with them. In the case where I moved more to a faith-based organization, I didn't lose my last friends, but I gained a number of new friends that were more faith-based oriented, matching up with my current values. And the final thing I wish I'd had and didn't have is a mentor. Find somebody who you respect and who's willing to spend the time and invest in you to help you think about where you're going.
Thank you, Wally. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Alan.
This has been another in our Leaders of Tomorrow series. I'm Alan Olson.